Good evening, children. Well, today I've picked up a topic for you, and that is going to be from the book Hornbill. Okay, this is the book Hornbill, and the first chapter. Okay, the first chapter is the Portrait of a Lady. This is written by Khushwant Singh. It describes the relationship of a child with his grandmother. All right. Now, just wanted to go ahead and read this out to you because I'm sure you would have all read this. My grandmother, like anybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty, and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. Right. So when your grandmother tells you that, she was young, she would play certain games when she was a child, it becomes very difficult for you to digest it. But yes, she had been young, she had been a child, and she used to play the games, right? So that's a reality, okay? She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Now, the author is relating, the condition of his grandmother, which is at present, she's old, right? Now, when he relates the old state of his grandmother when she was young, it becomes difficult for him to believe all this. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her, old and so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of a rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. This is how the author is describing the beauty of his grandmother. Like the winter landscape, like the winter landscape in the mountains. When you go out in the hills or in the mountains, you see the snow, right? It's all white everywhere, okay? And there you see it's like peaceful, calm, serene, quiet. So that's why he says she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. All right, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Yes, old people are content in themselves. They don't have any desires, as in they have risen above all worldly desires. Right. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayers in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. All right, so like old people, they sing some old songs, they sing some old prayers. This teaches, this is part of, bringing up children in a better way. And this cannot be done any better by anyone except a grandmother, right? So this is how the love of a grandmother is for the grandchildren. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle, and hand it to me. After breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. This was a routine. She would carry stale chapatis for the dogs. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. All right. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. All right. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So in the city, you have small houses, you hardly have space. So she would now feed the sparrows in the courtyard. As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principles, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy, obviously, because you know why? Well, why did she become unhappy? She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars, and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me about that. Okay? When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. Accepting seclusion with resignation means that earlier on, the grandmother would take care of the child, she would spend more time with the child, she would bathe the child, she would dress him up, give him breakfast, drop him to school. So this was part of her routine. Now she's taken up, she's accepted seclusion with resignation. Seclusion means to be away, all right, and resignation means accepting something, taking yourself away or withdrawing yourself away from a task that you regularly do. All right. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows, while she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits. Hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirplings. Now, bedlams actually would be noise, chaos, When birds chirp, there's a lot of noise, right? So, all the birds would come to her for the little crumbs, little bits of bread that she would throw at them. Some some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled, but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. Obviously, life is unpredictable. So that's what the author says. Because she's old, you never know. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of a rosary. Silently she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. So she has come to pick the author at the railway station. She did not look at she did not look a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. Frivolous rebukes means that she was totally dedicated and she fed the sparrows. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. Obviously, she was old, so the author was caring, and they had to intervene to stop her from playing the drum because that would strain her and she might fall ill. All right, now that was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. Right? But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. We protested, but she ignored our protests. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving, and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. It was the end of it. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff, wrapped in the red shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirpings. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's cups off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the bread crumbs into the dustbin. So, this talks about life, this talks about the relationship which a child has, with her grandmother. Right, I have simply read it. Now, next, what I'll do is I would go ahead and give you solutions. like the understanding the tech, etc. I'll make a video of it later, guys.